Hello, and welcome back to Book and Page. We are still working our way through The Lightning Thief, though we are getting towards the end. In fact, in today's video, we've reached the underworld. Probably a place most people don't want to go, but hey, that was the destination of our intrepid adventurers. So as always, we will start with a summary of what happened in chapters 17 and 18, and then go ahead and talk about things a little more deeply. So, chapter 17. Having escaped the Lotus Hotel, Annabeth has the idea to try and use the debit card the hotel gave them to get a taxi ride. It surprisingly works, and they actually get all the way to LA, specifically to Santa Monica. Now, on the trip, Percy tells them about the latest dream that he had, but the hotel actually left his memories a little fuzzy, so he has difficulty remembering clearly. Annabeth is starting to suspect who might be in that pit, but she doesn't want to talk about it because the idea scares her. Her insistence is it's got to be Hades. Arriving at sunset on the beach, Percy takes a look at the ocean and goes, "Yep, that's exactly where I need to go," and walks into it. Thanks to a small shark giving him a ride, he got deep enough into it that he actually met a spirit of the ocean, who works for Poseidon's court. She's the messenger he saw on the Mississippi River, and she's back again. She has a gift for him and a warning. The gift is 3 fantastic pearls from the sea that will offer some sort of assistance depending on the situation. Not super clear on that one, but Percy takes them anyways. The warning is to trust his instincts and follow his heart, because Hades is well known to mess with you and make you doubt yourself. Thanks. Cool. He then asks what she meant last time by beware the gifts, and she just says, "Ah, bye." Thanks, that was very helpful. Percy swims back up and meets back up with Annabeth and Grover. They then wander around LA because they have no idea where this DOA record company is. It gets even worse when they get jumped by a bunch of rich kids who want to beat them up, and it turns out Percy forgot that celestial bronze cannot damage mortals. They run into a waterbed store to escape and meet with Krusty, the owner there. It turns out, though, Krusty, he's a monster, and he likes to make sure people fit his 6-feet beds exactly, either by stretching them to fit or chopping off the extra distance. Grover and Annabeth are both caught, and Percy saves them by tricking Krusty into trying his own waterbed, and Percy decapitates him. Letting Grover and Annabeth up, Percy also finds a flyer for DOA Records that has the address. It turns out it's just down the road. Excellent. Chapter 18, they head for DOA, finding the record company full of dead people who are being watched by Mr. Charon. He is the boatman of the afterlife, taking spirits over the river Styx, but only if they have money. Mr. Charon's also smart enough to realize that these dead kids are very much alive, and they're also demigods. So it's only when Percy actually pays him a bunch more money that they get accepted onto the boat and ferried over the river Styx, arriving in the world of Hades. We get a quick overview of what the underworld is like for the Greeks, aka the 3 different areas you can go to. You can be sent to a nice fancy field where all the heroes go for having done great things in their lives. You can be punished eternally, and those are your 2 options if you go ahead and get judged, or you can simply take the middle road and stand in a wheat field for the rest of your life. Death. Rest of your death. Ultimately, though, these kids aren't planning anything like that. They just need to get past Cerberus or Kerberos, depending on whether you think it's a soft sea or a hard sea. Most people, though, believe that there was no soft sea in ancient Greek, so it's probably Kerberos. And get in to see Hades. The plan doesn't go very well when Percy tries to distract Kerberos with a stick and throws it into the river Styx. Thankfully, though, Annabeth also has a ball and gives the dog enough attention for them to slip on through, though she does feel bad that she then had to leave the poor thing. Looks like he could just use a little love in his lifetime. Yeah, they're into the underworld now. Fantastic. Took a few more adventures to get there, but like I said, that is the whole Odyssey style of adventure. You keep running into things. But this is another aspect of the epic. There is always this underworld trip. Now, sometimes for the epics, such as the Iliad, the underworld comes to you. For example, Achilles being visited by Patroclus. But most times, it's a literal trip into the underworld. Odysseus did this. Aeneas did this in the Aeneid, which is notably a Roman fan fiction of the Greek epic style. But the underworld trip is pretty common, and we're actually told there are some people who have made it back. Now, most of us know of Orpheus, if I'm saying his name correctly, who went to save his wife, and because of his fantastic musical ear and playing, successfully did, though he didn't obey instructions well enough to actually escape with the wife. But he did get in and get out. Hercules also made the trip, notably actually taking Kerberos with him, though it should be noted most myths. Hades isn't actually the bad guy, so Hercules went in and asked Hades to take the dog. And Hades basically said, as long as you bring him back and don't hurt him. So, yeah, Hercules goes in, actually brings something out, and then releases Kerberos back to Hades as well. And apparently Houdini, who can escape any place. Love to know the story behind that one, but that's part of the world building. It's the idea that plenty of famous people, such as Shakespeare, who's also name-dropped in this set of chapters, have made it as demigods. And apparently Houdini is one of them. So that's a fascinating idea. And again, playing on the strengths of everybody. And in fact, these name-drop people, it's musical skills, strength, and escapability. And then the lady's just like, do you have any of those? And Percy goes, hell no, I don't. I'm 12. Like, it's one of those moments where you're just like, why are you getting a bunch of kids to do this? And it's because Percy is actually a very powerful demigod, or at least that's the idea, since he is a child of Poseidon. We should have that sense simply because, one, he has proven very powerful affinity with the water, no matter where it ends up being. So, Mississippi, random water park, ocean, things like that. He can also hear horses, and he's smart enough to remember his father's affinity for horses and start putting that together. He is also intelligent enough that he is willing and able to use trickery. Him actually talking Krusty onto the bed and then beheading him. I'm not sure that's what I expected. When you hear waterbeds, you kind of expect that Percy's affinity for water is going to come into it. But it doesn't. Percy just uses the trick against the monster. That's more of an Athenian way of doing things. Athenian being a child of Athena, not Athenian as in the city of Athens, named after Athena. Languages today, man. No, Percy is actually a very powerful demigod, but not just because of one thing. He has a myriad of talents that are only going to grow from here. It's just a question of how well he uses them and how much he trusts himself to be able to do that. We saw a lot of doubt in that fall into the Mississippi River that we're now getting a warning is going to come back into play when meeting with Hades. It turns out the gods have a tendency to ramp up certain emotions in you. With Ares, it tends to be the violent emotions, the anger, and the want to punch things. Aphrodite, well, we saw from her scarf alone that you can get a little lovey-dovey. Hades, apparently, tends to ramp up the despair and self-doubt. So that doubt that we've already seen is in Percy himself, well, that can be manipulated, and it's a question of how well he deals with that manipulation. And then whether or not he can recognize it. Because it turns out manipulation is something he understands. That's exactly how he got Krusty onto the bed. He had to recognize the manipulation Krusty was using himself to be able to do it, though. He couldn't force anything. That wasn't a strength check. That was a wit check for sure. And a little bit of charisma as well. The fact is that Percy can talk people into doing things if he's careful. And that's precisely it. He has to be careful. The mistake he made with Mr. Charon is the mispronunciation of his name. Because he called him Chiron, as in the centaur, and the names are very close, well, Charon didn't appreciate it. And it's the thing that actually gave these kids away for being demigods, their inability to read. It is part of Percy, but it's part of Percy that is identifying him as different. And I actually find this part key for precisely that problem in our life. The moment you have a harder time doing anything in particular, well, that identifies you as an outgroup. It identifies you as different, and thus, well, it could be simply different, or it could somehow become the enemy. Charon actually notices this right away, and is kind of like, please leave. Like, I'll just take your money and pretend you weren't here. Like, don't do stupid things. Don't be here. He's not here to help them. He's kind of just like, no. Not getting involved in this, like, not. But Percy picks it up again. When the story itself doesn't work, Percy goes for the manipulation side of things. Basically saying, well, we've got all this money and we don't know what to do with it. You could have it if you let us over. And I think in a lot of ways we should feel a little uncertain about how this is all going down. We've trusted Percy from the beginning because we can relate to him, but this sudden side of trickery, and trickery that has resulted in a monster's death, that can be a little unsettling. Percy himself admits that he had no problem beheading Krusty. That is a little off-putting from the beginning. Ultimately, though, we can understand it. He does actually point out a few things. First and foremost, this is self-defense. Krusty actually attacked them first, and is actively attempting to hurt or possibly kill both Grover and Annabeth, who are in significant pain during this event. He's also going to be trying to get Percy to fit, and fully admits that he's killed people before by chopping off parts of their limbs or stretching them too much. He doesn't care. So when it comes to saving yourselves and your friends, and Percy also points out a difference here, which is to say that this death is actually not a permadeath. His sword can't hurt mortals, and the monsters will eventually come back. Ultimately, it is the demigods who are sort of in this awkward position where they can be killed by a lot more things than either of the other sides. So his choice is, hey, if he's actually mortal, the sword won't hurt him. If he's not, well, he's a monster, and he'll just be dusted and come back at some point. And ultimately, with the number of people he's probably killed, he probably deserves it. But that is always going to make us a little uncomfortable. Well, has he killed anybody? Yes. When they get chased into the building, running from the kids, Krusty actually notes that he gets a lot of his customers that way. That's his way of admitting that this waterbed store has had a lot of bodies go through it. It kind of helps that DOA Records is just down the road. So Percy's decision here makes sense, especially since Krusty is a monster. And again, you're not always going to judge monsters based on that human moral compass, just like we spoke about the gods in the last video. So we might feel a little uncomfortable about Percy here, but he is a 12-year-old trying to survive. It's just a little concerning to see the ruthlessness that might go along with that. But truth be told, that's kind of the point. You put this much pressure on little kids to save the world, it's a little understandable when they start going a little weird. And this should be a warning to the gods for the most part. You put that much power in the hands of someone young, and then don't give any positive feedback, of course they're going to turn on you. And this is actually really well represented in Kerberos. And the fact that Annabeth feels bad having given him a little attention and then left him. This poor dog is just not given any love and affection. It's not played with by anybody. Most of the dead ignore it. Anyone who knows about it fears it. That's not fair to the dog. And Percy understands. He understands Annabeth being upset. He understands that they have the same idea, that sometimes things in the underworld just need a little bit of love. Well, that's true of the demigods too. They're at this awkward point, mainly because, well, they just want a little bit of attention. And positive attention, not constantly trying to kill them attention. That's why they can be ruthless with the monsters. That's not the attention they want. But a pat on the back from their mom or dad? Yeah. And Percy kind of calls Poseidon out on that one. When he meets the spirit of the sea, he says, well, if my dad's so proud of me, why isn't he here? But that's the complicated thing. We're judging the gods again on human standards. And the spirit warns Percy against this. The gods have their own rules to follow. And that includes right now non-interference, which we know they keep not listening to, but they at least need to make a show of it. Especially a show of not favoring their own kids. But Percy kind of recognizes the other problem there. If you're not going to take care of them, why do you keep having kids? It's more like you just want to gratify your side of things, and you don't care about the results. This entire thing, it's going to turn out, is because the gods don't care enough sometimes. And even if they do, they don't show it. These kids have been desperately fighting for some sort of validation, and ultimately they have to learn to find that validation in themselves and in each other. Because the gods are the gods. That's not probably what a lot of people want to hear, but ultimately it is actually something, again, we can learn from Percy and this book. The fact is that people are deeply, deeply flawed, and we're never going to get the exact validation we want from somebody. You can't tell somebody how exactly to love you properly. That's not how people work. So, finding a way to be happy with yourself is key. Because the world is always going to be full of disappointments. And recognizing that and saying that's okay, well, that's one of the hardest lessons we're ever going to have to learn in life. Truth be told, the reason why I do this entire series is because we can learn a lot from the literature that we read. Precisely, we can learn without having to experience everything constantly. If we can experience it through the eyes of somebody else, then maybe we don't have to hurt as much to be able to get the lesson and start changing how we look at ourselves and the world. That's the point of books. Sure, there's the entertainment factor, but if you read a little deeper, you're gonna learn a lot too. And sometimes what you learn isn't always gonna be the nicest. Sometimes parents don't care, or don't show that they care, or think that they're showing that they care, and it's just not translating into a language kids can understand. Sometimes we're gonna do ruthless things, and sometimes we're just trying to survive. What's really interesting is the group of children that actually try to rob them are rich kids. They're ones that haven't suffered any loss, so they don't have the empathy for the loss from other people, nor are they actually economically needing to rob people. It is that attention issue. These people have to look at me because I am literally threatening their lives. How different are the demigods from this group of kids? Look at me. I am powerful. I can do things too. Truth be told, I think this is going to be a shorter video simply because as the action moves along, it is a question of whose attention do I want? And where should our attention be? We do get the sense that maybe Hades isn't the bad guy, but there's a story there we have to tell ourselves to just keep moving forward. And no one wants to admit that they were wrong, including the gods. They're going to have a hard time recognizing that they've made some mistakes when it comes to how they've helped raise their children. So, I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.